The Green Mountains that gave Vermont its name also could be called the Asbestos Mountains. The same geologic processes that produce the greenish-hued minerals that predominate, mica, quartz, and chlorite, also produced an abundance of serpentine, which is a source of chrysotile asbestos. Vermont was once a producer of chrysotile, and in fact was the first state in which asbestos was mined commercially. According to the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry map of the U.S. asbestos, there were a number of areas in northern Vermont that were considered for commercial asbestos production but never developed. One of these sites was actually a source of amphibole fiber, which is even more deadly than the more commonly used chrysotile variety. The population of Vermont increased by nearly 20% between 1980 and 2000. Nonetheless, at a current population of around 624,000, it has the lowest population of any other state except Wyoming. In the 2 decades prior to the 2000 census, there were 75 fatalities attributable to asbestos disease. Vermont's asbestos history. Although Henry Johns Company, the descendant of which is Johns Manville Incorporated, had been in existence for 50 years, it was the New England Asbestos Mining and Milling Company that first mined the substance commercially in Vermont around the year 1899. This was the first commercial asbestos mine in the U.S., predating the operations in Libby, Montana by over 2 decades. The mine, located on Mount Belvedere, did not operate for long. The company closed the mine in 1902, but operations were restarted following the First World War. By 1929, the Eden Belvedere mine was producing virtually the entire domestic supply of asbestos. The mine changed ownership several times over the decades. As the health hazards of asbestos became more and more apparent during the 1970s, legal pressure was placed on the mine's owners by the EPA to make the operation less toxic. As is often the case, management resisted. Nonetheless, demand for asbestos dropped precipitously throughout the 1980s. The Mount Belvedere mine was the last U.S. asbestos operation to close down in 1993. The area continues to be of interest to geologists and other scientists, however, as scientists explore ways of sequestering excess carbon dioxide. Vermont's asbestos industries and job sites. Asbestos was an ingredient in many building materials prior to 1980. These materials included a product called transite, a type of wallboard made from asbestos-reinforced concrete, roofing shingles, linoleum flooring, ceiling tiles, popcorn ceiling texturing, pipe lagging, and insulation, as well as concrete water pipes. One such insulation product was vermiculite, a type of clay from Libby, Montana, that was frequently contaminated with tremolite asbestos, a form of amphibole. As a result, asbestos is frequently found not only in private homes, but also in public buildings in which one would not normally expect to find asbestos. These include schools, hospitals, and office buildings. The Hogback Ski Area dorms are one such place. Vermont's power plants. According to the Center for Health Statistics, data and the findings of a recent study in Puerto Rico, electrical power generation plants are exceptionally dangerous workplaces in terms of asbestos exposure. Vermont has one such plant worthy of mention, the Vermont Yankee Nuclear Power Plant, currently owned and operated by Entergy Nuclear, which took over from Yankee Atomic Power in 2002. Asbestos has been widely used in power generation facilities as a flame retardant and insulator against both heat and electrical current. Electric wiring, panel partitions, and electrical cloth all contain asbestos prior to the 1980s. Asbestos insulation was used to pack electrical conduits. The materials used to build the housing facility were also manufactured with asbestos-containing materials, or ACMs. Legal resources in Vermont. A search through the Vermont Federal District Court cases for asbestos-related personal injury product liability lawsuits brings up no recent lawsuits. Vermont is ranked 46th in the U.S. for mesothelioma cases. With a mesothelioma mortality rate of 14.55 per million, Vermont has a crude mortality rank of 13 in the country. In Vermont, there are a number of known asbestos-exposed areas. comprehensive list of these areas can be found in this section of Asbestos.net. Individuals living or working near these areas should be checked regularly for signs of mesothelioma in order to file any lawsuits within the state's statute of limitations. While many of these sites have been inspected and some have been cleaned up, anyone who worked or lived in these areas before asbestos contamination was reported can still be affected. Also, it is important to keep in mind that these are only known asbestos sites. Other areas in the state may contain asbestos, but may have not yet been reported as such. In terms of wrongful death suits, in 2006, Vermont Supreme Court ruled that if the decedent has no living spouse, children, or parents, the surviving sibling may file a wrongful death suit seeking damages for loss of companionship. A Vermont statute provides that in a wrongful death case, the court jury may award damages with regard to pecuniary injuries to the wife, husband, or next of kin of the decedent. The court had previously held that pecuniary injuries do not have to be limited to economic losses, but can also include recovery for loss of a child or spouse's companionship, as well as loss of care, nurture, and protection. The court ruled that if a sibling, when next of kin of the decedent, submits evidence of the emotional, physical, and psychological relationship with the decedent, it is appropriate to award damages. In Carter v. Fred's Plumbing and Heating, Incorporated, Vermont courts found that a plumber who developed asbestosis at least 19 years after his work-related exposure to asbestos was subject to the statute of limitations defined in the Occupational Disease Act, which was in force at the time of his last exposure. Since that act specified compensation was only payable if disablement occurred within 5 years of a work-related injury, the plaintiff's claims were dismissed. In another key case in the state, Sheltra v. Vermont Asbestos Group, Vermont courts accepted the claimant's argument that the statute of limitations should begin at the time of discovery if discovery occurred after July of 1999, when the discovery rule for occupational disease was established. The legislature then amended the Occupational Disease Act to provide for the discovery rule, thus removing the harsh results that would have occurred for injuries that take a long time to manifest, such as mesothelioma, under the repealed Occupational Disease Act. Those interested in filing lawsuits should know that the statute of limitations for personal injury law in Vermont is 3 years, with a discovery rule that states that this amount of time begins when the problem, in this case the mesothelioma, was either discovered or should have been discovered. Wrongful death cases are limited to a 2-year statute of limitations with the same discovery rule. There is no special statute for asbestos cases in Vermont. Thank you for watching. This video was produced by Asbestos.net, a leading resource on all aspects of asbestos and mesothelioma. Our priority is to inform victims about the devastating effects of asbestos exposure, mesothelioma, asbestos cancer, asbestosis, and other asbestos-related diseases, and to advise them with a wealth of information. Individuals whose lives have been touched by mesothelioma have numerous questions and concerns. Their caregivers and family members also need accurate, reliable information. If you or a loved one have been diagnosed with mesothelioma or asbestos cancer and need more information, we invite you to visit and explore the thousands of pages of oncologist-reviewed material on Asbestos.net, to call our convenient toll-free number shown below and speak with a mesothelioma specialist, or to use the simple contact form found at Asbestos.net to request a free copy of our informative books, custom inserts, and DVD. Asbestos.net. Information and help for patients and families.